So, Stephen, would you mind introducing yourself?
Well, my name is Stivън Lewis Симпсън, and I'm a filmmaker originally from Scotland, but now Plovdiv is my home.
Ooh. And how does a Hollywood filmmaker ditch everything over there and come to live here in Plovdiv, in an Eastern European country?
Because I have good sense. I think when I moved here, it's sort of always a series of sort of happy accidents that brought me here. But I really realized that it was what I needed, because particularly the US and Los Angeles were doing my head in, and it just wasn't a satisfactory life I was having there. And Plovdiv has sort of given me everything that I wasn't getting from my life there. It's really been probably the best decision I've ever made, was moving here.
Oh, that's so awesome. And would you mind sharing what was the thing that made you decide to stay? When did you know that you were going to stay here in Plovdiv for? What caught your heart?
Well, I first randomly found myself in Bulgaria a number of years ago, about 12 years ago. I went to visit somebody in Sofia for 2-3 days who was an American who was visiting. And I really liked it, so I stayed about 10 weeks, even though it was a freezing winter. And the final weekend I went on a road trip with a friend, and we came to Plovdiv, and the moment I walked into the city I thought I should have been here for those 10 weeks. It was an instant feeling. And then a few years later, there's a story which is actually I used in the movie, but I was on a road trip from Zagreb going east, and I found myself back in Plovdiv, and I found that there was a karaoke bar I liked very much, and had a lovely time. And then randomly the following year I was back in Sofia visiting this friend, and thought, where am I going to go next? I came to Plovdiv, and I never left. And to put it in context, the previous year I was in 20 countries, for about a month in quite a few of them, and every time I'm there, where next? And ever since I've been in Plovdiv, I'm like, I don't even want to go to Sofia for a couple of days. Oh yeah, I don't want to be anywhere else now.
Okay. And how's Plovdiv been treating you? I hear that you're quite popular with your neighbors.
Yes, and it's the funny thing is, when I came here and I was having a really nice, I say a nice time, life was becoming more centered, and I really fell for the place very quickly, and I immediately started looking for somewhere to buy, which was a real change for me because I'd always been living on the road. And I was always worried that I was maybe being a little delusional, thinking, well, sooner or later I'll get itchy feet again, as we would say. But every year has just gotten better and better, really has. And since I bought this house 2.5 years ago, and having this as a project and the movie as a project, the relationship with the city has just taken on a whole new level.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's beautiful. And about your new movie, Retrospect, when did you first got the idea for it? Related specifically to Plovdiv, or was it something lying in your head from before which came to life here?
The idea very much came from when I was here, but a lot of the time, the movies we make sometimes are just, you have something in the back of your mind for a long time, and then suddenly different pieces fall into place, and you go, I've got to start writing this now. And I early on from being here, I just was fascinated by this old man who lived nearby a place I was staying. And I just sort of started fantasizing what was his backstory. Why was he having this very solitary life? And I just thought, wouldn't it be interesting if you had a character who, used to be a spy for the secret police, spying on his neighbors, that kind of spy. And then when the system changed, things were found out about him, and people really didn't want to have anything to do with him. And I just thought that was an interesting character. But it just sort of sat in my mind for a couple of years. And then certain other things with other characters started coming together, and I was thinking, I now know how to piece this together. And then the moment I started writing, it came together very, very quickly. But it was more just the drama and the characters and of a good story. But then the fun part for me was throwing in a lot of the flavor of my life in Plovdiv. And the funny thing is, for people that know me around here, there's quite a few in-jokes in the film, really, because it's like, my favorite bar and Koka and all these sorts of things. That's just all in there.
Yeah, that's intertwined. And the cast of the movie, did you have someone specific in mind? I know that Yulia was one of the people you wrote a specific role for. Did you know who the other people in the cast would be beforehand?
No. When I wrote it, I thought, well, when Yuli sort of became Karana and started creating her extraordinary, interesting career and this sort of trajectory she's been on. I mean, I knew her from before then, and just knew she had this dynamic that was very unique. And I thought, well, she's really got to do something on screen, because I think she could do well.
She's such a vibrant person, yes?
Yes. But then you have a character that's a character, and that character doesn't have that vibrant nature. And what she did so well was she kind of left herself at the door, this unique, charismatic person. And she really does step into the character very, very well. But, I had this older man, and I had a friend here who said, okay, you've got to meet Simeon, who they were good friends and family friends. And the moment I had him read for it was extraordinary. The first time he did it, he'd only read 2 scenes, not the whole script, and he did the first scene, and it was excellent. It just wasn't the character I was looking for, but he hadn't read the character I was looking for. So I said to him through the translation, "Can you take it in this direction?" Immediately he did, and it was amazing transformation. And then I asked, just can you change the rhythm of it a bit? Immediately, and I thought, that's it. Never looked at anyone else from that moment. And the rest of the casting, a lot of it was quite simple, because people were giving me pointers to some people at the drama theatre, like Stefan Popov. Him and Simeon are dear friends for forever, and filming.
Lynn as well.
Exactly. And so really the only couple of hard parts in a way were, there's a couple of foreign characters, particularly this traveller who's in the film at the beginning, and I needed someone from Southeast Asia, and it took a while to find the right person, but it was also somebody who was living here, and did a great job. So and with the detective character, it was interesting because Kenny, everyone knows Ivo as Kenny here. And the funny thing is, the nice thing when you come somewhere and you don't know anyone is that you read people with sort of fresh eyes.
You're not biased, and yes.
Yes, and a lot of people know Kenny as a clown from his years, or from his theatre, which is a very dynamic kind of theatre, and film is so kind of small and subtle. But I didn't know that, so when he comes in and reads for me, and he was very, very interesting, and his English was also very good, because he has to do in both languages. And then I sort of discovered this other side of his creativity after, which was very exciting. So it just came together quite simply for the most part.
It did. It sure sounds like it. And what was your favorite part of filming in Plovdiv?
How easy it was. I think that it was a very easy city to film in, especially because I owned the main location. That made life easy. But we shot a lot in the old town, and so we would just pick up the camera and walk down the street, and you don't worry about traffic and all these things. We filmed in the entranceway of some of the heritage houses, just doubling as other things, and the people that ran that just said, okay, what do you need? It was very simple and very helpful. And but I mean, to me, the absolute high point was working with Simeon. That really was just the best experience I've ever had working with an actor.
And you don't even speak the same language.
And we don't even speak the same language. Yeah. I think the funny thing is that some of the best experiences I've had when I've been traveling has been when I've been communicating with people where we can't speak to each other. Because what you do is you just coordinate through body language, and
it's a very genuine connection.
It really is. And because of that, we really radiate an energy to each other. And he knows I love his instincts. And that's one of the best things for an actor, is when they feel that the director wants them pushing the edges of things.
So you instantly clicked.
Yeah. But the amazing thing was, when the first scene that we shot in the movie was a key scene where Karana and Simeon's characters meet for the first time, and this is her first ever scene in a movie. and it's quite a detailed and powerful scene, and the two of them together, the chemistry was instant, and I could tell how impressed he was with how she was performing, knowing that this was her first time. And there's something that people who haven't acted before, and you're doing a dialogue scene, they become, in their heads, it's all about the lines, because that's what I'm learning my lines, and she did something that I thought was so mature, which was she never ever had this feeling of, okay, now I have to say something. She always felt the space, she let things land, she let things be absorbed, and everything came out within the perfect timing. And I thought that was really extraordinary without ever having trained or had previous experience.
She kind of adapted and lived the role throughout the movie.
Yes, but she had the courage to not fear the space. And I think that a lot of people will look at somebody like her career on stage as a performer and all of these other things and think, oh, she's got there because of talent. Well, there's a lot of people out there with talent. Not many people with the talent in as many avenues as she has, but I think there's a few things she has that most people don't. She's focused.
Yes,
there's nothing else that exists, and that's the only way you can really keep pushing it. But the other thing is that she has a lot of courage. It's like when she did Evita as her first ever musical. I mean, that takes courage. To sit down in a film and have the courage to let the space, to own the space.
It's true. It's true. She does, whenever and wherever she walks in, she does own the space, and she does it with such confidence.
Yeah.
It's admirable.
And I think the reality is, and this goes for myself as well, is, a lot of the times performers have a core part of themselves that's very shy. I mean, I'm a very shy person in most situations. But there's a point where your ambition and your drive is greater, and you squash that down, which it makes the courage even more admirable, because you're pushing it down part of your main nature.
Absolutely.
So you managed to get, let's say, the perfect cast, the perfect crew.
Yeah.
Were there any challenges though while filming?
I mean, there was a challenge that I never expected. Now, normally in a film, most of my movies, you shoot for a few weeks and you're just shooting 6 out of 7 days until you're done. With this one, I wanted to do it more relaxed, so we filmed in blocks. Now in Los Angeles, if you want an actor, they're always available, pretty much. They'll give up their waiting job for a few days or whatever it is. And the shocking thing here, and this was across the board. I mean, we know, with Karen and the cosmonauts and with other things, Yulia is always very busy. But the other actors, I mean, they're in the theater all the time, or they're rehearsing and whatever else. So we would have days where we were filming a half day, and then, Simeon would go to the theater at 4 p.m. and be on stage for the evening. Same with quite a few of the other actors, and that to me was just amazing, because the theater scene here is so vibrant.
It is, yes.
I'm from a city a little bit smaller than Plovdiv, and by a standard of a city that size, is actually quite a rich city because it's oil capital of Europe, Aberdeen in Scotland, and we don't have a single professional arts company. Not a single acting company, dance company, or anything like that. We have some good venues, but they only have things coming in. Whereas you have an opera house here with a really large staff. You've got a drama theater with a large staff, and exactly. And then you have the puppet theater and the hand theater, and it blows my mind.
Yeah.
And they're busy
All the time. Every month there are programs. Every day, 30 spectacles.
Yeah.
Amazing.
When we premiered at the Sofia Film Festival, it was running for about 2 weeks, and I was trying to find dates for, particularly Simeon, to be available. And in those 2 weeks, he was on stage in 9 different productions. That's next level.
That's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
That's mind-blowing, really.
I want to take you just a bit off topic with some Bulgarian, perhaps. If you've learned something you'd like to share, your favorite phrase or anything in Bulgarian.
Well, the funny thing is that I normally find that the best thing is when I meet somebody, rad vam se da se zapoznajem. It's kind of like, at least you're getting off to a respectful start. I think the problem here is that socially, so many of the people, their English is so spectacular, and dealing with my bad Bulgarian is probably... But it's really the essentials that you sort of, Bihishkal Chasha Cherveno Vino Malia was probably the first line I ever learned. You're like, you're starting off with, not can you take me to your nearest hospital, but, the thing about it is that the good thing about doing the movie has been, in a way, my ear has gotten a lot better.
Yes.
It's just my brain having the speed enough to catch up and forming a conversation out of it is, Mogli de Sednatuk, you're like simple things like
these things, yes.
Okay, I'm not pushing you any further with the Bulgarian. Yes, and okay, so after the successful debut of the film at Sofia Film Fest, when can we expect it in cinemas?
Well, we're opening throughout the country on the 3rd of May. We're going to be in every cinema in Plovdiv for, be in a couple of weeks in all of those minimum. And, the thing that's nice for me is obviously we're in a lot of the multiplex cinemas, but we're also in a lot of the small towns. And, and that's great. Partly because we've got a big marketing job to do, and with the success of the last movie I had in the US, I became very good at figuring out how to market in small towns. And that's one of the things I think a lot of times people forget about. They just do their big national marketing. And that's curious to me because, if I'm advertising here, as we know, there's a million things to do at the weekends. But if you're in a town of 30,000 and it's a Friday, Saturday night, it's the cinema or the pub or, so... I think there's a lot of value in making people in these communities aware of the film, and I think the thing that's exciting about it for me is that, to me the film in a way has, it's a focus I have a lot of the time, but I like a really tight story. I like a really driven narrative that really challenges the audience and is exciting and whatever, which is more kind of the way that good American films were written, particularly old American films. But having the sort of much deeper real characterizations that you'd more find in European cinema, and sort of merging that two together. And I think the thing is, if you're making something like a thriller, you make a mistake if you've not got a big budget and big stars to compete with those films.
Yes.
So what you have to do is you have to look at it and say, what do I have that they don't have? And with a thriller, you have something very powerful, which is, when you have a star, a lot becomes predictable. They become a heroic character. They're going to survive. All these things are going to happen. But if you ground it into a more real environment and make them very real, then any time there's a situation, they might be in danger or whatever else, or just the sheer drama of it, I normally find the audience connect with them in a much more sort of deep way. And I think the biggest responsibility as a writer, a storyteller in general, is to create something that the audience cannot predict, that is fresh. And Hollywood has forgotten how to do things fresh. It's recycling ideas. But the one thing I can guarantee, that when somebody's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, however long into the movie, that they can never predict where it's going to go. And that's something I would say in all confidence. Partly because of how I write. When I'm writing, I've never like, where's this going to go? And
I was just going to ask you, what would you recommend to people to see the film? But I think you just gave me the perfect answer. So,
well, beyond that, you're seeing some amazing Bulgarian talent doing amazing work. And, I think, I would be surprised if there are many Bulgarian films or many films anywhere where, you're having somebody just with a performance as good as Simeon's in this movie. It's just that thing where you just find you have somebody doing the perfect job, adding so much depth. And, but also I think, they're going to see the debut on screen of, one of the most exciting talents in Bulgaria. And, I think people will enjoy that too. But it's entertaining. That's the main thing.
And directed by by a person coming from the Western industry with a brand new and fresh perspective on all of these people, you can actually shine their talent through your work.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting thing when I think a lot of cinema works well when you have films made from people outside. I mean, Ang Lee, for example, has done some of the best American films. I mean, Brokeback Mountain, is not, you would say, his world, for example, or Alan Parker, the great British director, did the Deep South in the U.S. better than almost anything I've ever seen in Angel Heart and Mississippi Burning, for example, but an Englishman. But I think sometimes you come in somewhere and things just are magnetic to you. And sometimes it's even just the beauty of locations. Well, I have to film here, I have to film here. Whereas people live there their whole lives. It's just normal.
They stop noticing.
Yeah.
This is very treasure.
Yeah. There was one thing when I had one of my staff doing the translation. She was the first person to read the script. And I said to her, message me as you're going through it. Let me know your thoughts as they're happening. And there was a dialogue in the film where she messaged me and she said, how do you know that this is the thing that old people tell us about the old days here? How do you know that? And I think it was just this thing of when you hear from two or three people the same thing, you're kind of like, I see a pattern here and it makes sense and whatever. But when I've heard things like that, or I had Simeon or Stefan from that generation read the script and some of the historical things, and did they feel that it was accurate? And they were like, yeah, we lived through this, and I recognize that. It's always important for me not just to kind of go blindly into it, but to get that bit of feedback, because then, I made a series of films on Native American themes, and the closer I went to those Native communities, the stronger and better the response I would get, because they would understand the flavor in it deeper than anyone else, and that, to me, that's about my favorite thing about storytelling, because the biggest thing we want as human beings is almost to be heard, and that people really take the time to connect with us. And for me, it's like when I have people say, oh yeah, that worked for me, it's kind of like, oh good, I paid attention. Because that's the other thing about being heard. It's for us to also pay attention. And, not just as a broad cultural thing, but really just, these are very distinct individuals. Yeah, always has to be individuals.
Of course.
And to finish off, are you happy with the final result of the movie?
Yes, and the funny thing is that normally as a filmmaker, you're just grateful to get to the end, and you're sort of thinking of all the things that could have been, because it's a mad rush. And this is the happiest I've ever been with the performances in any film I've ever made. Narratively, I think the story works very, very well. It is.